All right, folks, welcome back to the dojo. So I'm going to do the anatomy of a shot part 2 here because I know aligning camera plates and grid and all that good stuff that there's a lot of steps and it can get pretty complicated. So hopefully we're going to go and we're going to find sort of a happy medium so that you guys get really good at this. So first things first, I'm going to go to View, Image Plane, and we're going to import our image. I'm going to use a lovely image that I shot in the gardens of Versailles outside of Paris. There it is. And one of the reasons I chose this image is because, as you can see, there are absolutely no perspective lines by which I can govern any sort of horizon line or perspective. So I sort of have to figure out how to do things. First things first, let's open our render settings here. Boom. And make sure that we're working in 1920 by 1080. So we want to be in HD 1080 here. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to turn on our resolution gate right here. Use this shortcut. And then we are going to, with our image plane selected, we're going to make certain to tick fit to resolution gate so that when we render, this image will stretch and fill the full resolution gate during render. All right, so we've set up our image plane. We're good to go. First thing I need to do is go up to View, and we'll select Camera, and I need to make sure that I punch in the focal length at which this footage or this image was shot. I happen to know that I shot it at 40 millimeters, so I can punch that in. And now, the first thing that people normally do, exactly, and I've watched a bunch of you do this, is kind of like this, and you go, all right, tickety-boo, we're good. That looks right to me. Well, it's not. And so I need to make a few adjustments and things first. So again, for our workflow, we're going to make a new camera. So we'll have both our work camera here. This is the camera we'll use, and this is our shooting camera. And so we'll go to a 2-up workspace, and I'll change this panel over to perspective 1. First things first is before I do anything with this camera, what I would like to do is I would like to go into my orthographic, maybe side view, and position it properly at its height. Now I know that I took this photo standing up, so I'm about 6'2". So I am going to use my grid here and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just about 6. The reality is that should be a good elevation for me right there. So that's kind of the first thing that I want to set on this camera spatially. I'm going to estimate about how high it was when I shot it, and I'm going to place the camera there. Let's switch back to our perspective view here. I'm now going to Control G, group it to itself so that I can rotate it and control it. Now, if I hit my rotation tool, as I've shown you guys, I prefer to use the channel box here to kind of make those adjustments. It's very easy for me to kind of do this and say, well, that looks about right. However, I can promise you that it is not. There's a trick here that I'm going to show you, though, where we can create something that'll help us out. Since we can't find our horizon line here using perspective lines from within the image, I'm going to gauge my horizon line visually. And that's this green grass back here. You can see it between these metal sort of bulwarks or these barricades. So that green line right there is my horizon line. That is about where the eye would penetrate into the thing. So to figure out how to get to that horizon line, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a polygon primitive plane. And we're going to do what I call an infinite plane here. And I'll show you what I mean. So we're just going to scale it up so it kind of fills the image here. Now, we're not adjusted yet, so nothing's going to be ready to go. But the other thing I want to do before I move this plane into position is I would like to select my image plane that I'm using as my camera plate. And under its image plane shape node, I'm going to come down here and under placement where it says depth, let's change this to about 1,000. What that'll do is it pushes the image plane far, far back where it won't interfere with anything visually. However, in our view right here, it doesn't look like anything has changed, and that's really good for us. So what this plane is for is I'm going to use this plane. I'll go into wireframe mode, toggle 4 on my keyboard here. I'm going to use this plane to push it back into space till it's almost a line segment that aligns with this horizon line. Right now we're not even close. So again, I'll select my camera, hit the up arrow key to get to the top of the group here, and with my rotate tool I'm going to rotate. We're pretty much going to need to rotate this down a decent amount, probably about like this, just to start. And then I'll show you something cool. Let's switch to our orthographic top view. I'm going to zoom out here, like so. And let's just start pushing this plane back in space. Do you see how it's flying above this horizon line right here? All right, that tells me that I am not remotely lined up. Let's Control Z and bring that back. We're going to rotate this down. And then let's keep it's sort of a hit or miss thing. Not really. I'll show you how we can really kind of nail this here in a second. But do you see what I'm saying? I want it to fly back through space and stay aligned with this horizon line. We don't have that yet, so I'm going to, again, we'll just rotate this down a little more. Whoops. Made an error there. I'm rotating the darn plane. Make sure you grab the camera, up arrow, boom. I want to rotate the camera, not the plane. Okay, so make sure you do that. So we're going to, there we go, rotate the plane. Rotate the camera. I'm just tired, guys. I've been doing this for a while. Full disclosure, I've actually done this tutorial thrice, and each time I forgot to record or something went wrong. Now do you see what I mean? As I push the plane back, it's colliding with that horizon line right through here. However, it's kind of staying as a line segment on the horizon line. Now I'm going to place it right there where I can kind of see it close to the horizon line, and I'm going to use that as a gauge, selecting that camera again, up arrow key so I can grab its group, and then I'm going to kind of tweak this rotation on the x-axis to about right there. If I zoom out and grab this and move it, you'll see, there we go, perfect. Now it's staying right there. I bring it back, there we go. That is how we use a proxy plane. That is how we use a proxy plane or an infinite plane to help us find perspective whilst we're in an environment that does not really have any sort of perspective lines for us to go by. I can use this as my shadow plate now, and at this point I will bring in some proxy geometry, just an easy primitive cube. And once again, let's switch to maybe the front view here. So orthographic front, like so, so that I can hold down the D key and the V key to snap that pivot point to the base of that, and then I'll hold the X key just to snap that right onto the grid, like so. And I'll use this proxy geometry just to see how things look. So I'll assign it an AI standard surface material, and I'll assign my proxy plate here. I can scale it down at this point because now I know that everything's aligned. I'm just going to use this as my sort of shadow mat, and so I'll assign it my favorite material, AI shadow mat. Now let's put a light in our scene. We'll use an Arnold sky dome light. I'll switch back to one view so you guys can see here. Now with Arnold sky dome light, I generally like to come in and turn it down to 0 at camera. And under viewport, I'll also put its radius, its sky radius, as 0. That's so that it's not visually there. I don't want it kind of getting in my way and, kind of messing with my head. So to help us around here, we've got a broad daylight sort of shot. Sorry, my OBS Studio keeps disconnecting. Hold on, guys. Alright, I'm sorry. OBS Studio has been acting up, so I've had to stop it, and I'm probably going to have to edit this tutorial together from multiple parts. I hope it's all clean and clear. If not, I'm sure you guys will let me know. Hopefully you will. If not, well, that's on you. So back here, we've created a sky dome light, And what I'm going to use for positioning on a scenario like this is we're going to go to our Arnold textures, and we're going to use the AI physical sky. And that'll at least let me position a sun, quote unquote, a sun in the sky to make sure that everything is falling where it is. Now, we have an odd scenario in this lighting. Maybe you guys can see we've got a double shadow, which generally implies two light sources. What that second light source is this first light source right here is the sun. That's our dark shadow. This lighter blue shadow is actually the palace, or the chateau, sorry, of Versailles. It's really a palace of Versailles right over here, reflecting, because it's massive, reflecting enough light off of its white paint that is creating a second light source bounce. So we might have to take care of that in a different way. But for now, let's just take a look at a render to see how everything's coming out here. So we'll pull up our render window. Let's check our alignments, and we'll have to tweak our sun. So there's our cube sitting in the gravel there all alone, just sad little cube amongst all these noble boulders. And I think, let me scale this down a bit more so that we can see kind of everything at the same time. I know that's probably a little small on you guys' screen. I'm trying to optimize this as much as we can. Alright, hopefully that's fairly visible to you. Let's go like, yeah, there we go. Maybe like that. And I'll move it over just a wee bit. Alright, so I've got my viewport open. I have my render kind of going active. And now I need to start playing with this lighting scenario. And I know that the azimuth of the sun, meaning its position on the horizon, should be more, over about here. I want to get it at roughly the same angle as these major shadows on these boulders over here. I'm using this one as my guide, so to speak. And then I know there's a formula that you can use photogrammetrically to determine the height of an object versus the length of its shadow to tell you what time of day and what what's known as inclination would be. And I think we're pretty close. I'm going to drop this elevation a little bit more, and that should get us about right. So positioning looks good. I think we're pretty good. We're locked in. That's camera's fairly well aligned to the grid. I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to lock that camera down, this icon right up here, so I don't accidentally move it. Now remember, I made my shadow plate fairly small just because it needs to only handle this cube. However, I think I would like to import something a bit more interesting in the scene to make certain that everything's working. So let me go and pull that from my hard drive. So I have imported, really quickly, I just kind of paused for a second to go look through my drive. I've imported this beach boulder here. I would like to place it just a little bit below our plane right here. So I'm kind of putting it, so it looks like it's kind of stuck into the gravel. I'm going to assign it a AI standard surface material, and then let's go assign those shaders to it. So first let's do base color. And it's good for you guys to see us do this multiple times because I know it can be a little bit daunting and confusing. So we're going to go to Maya, Models, we're going to go into the Bird of Sleep, and then it's Beach Boulder High, and this is my base color. Grab that. I'm not going to worry about metalness. I'm going to worry about roughness, however. File texture. I'm going to make sure to click alpha is luminance because these are now going to be grayscale files that I'll be using for this model right here. Again, Bird of Sleep. And we're going to just finish this off. So where is my roughness map? There is my roughness map. Good. And the only other map I'm going to include just for now would be my normal map. And we're going to do that in our hypershade. And again, I think it's good for you guys to see this multiple times. So easily done with our boulder selected. Open my hypershade, hit these two arrows, grab my shader group, hit those two arrows again, and it maps it out for me. Now I'm going to hit tab, AI norm, and I'm going to put in an AI normal map. That doesn't mean I won't put any color controls in here for now though, we're just keeping this pretty simple. And let's pipe that AI normal map out value into our normal camera. And then right over here under input, let's go and find that file for the normal map for this boulder right here. Now this boulder was not alpha is luminance, check it. This boulder was not modeled, it is a photo scan, which means I took multiple pictures of this this boulder from many angles, and I reconstituted it as a 3D mesh using all of those different pictures. I do need to invert Y, I think. Let me check it on this normal map. And let's just do a quick render and see how we're getting along here. Yeah, so here we go. It's going to take a second to build those textures. I'll pause it and bring it up when it's rendered. All right, render's done, so there you can see. Now I've pulled my own boulder into this scene. You may notice that the main cast shadow from the sun is not as dark as the main cast shadow. That's something that we'll either deal with here or that we'll deal with in our final comp. And we might look at that in a part 3, how to deal with this in a final comp. Nonetheless, I kind of want to move this through space just to see how it looks. Maybe dig it into the ground a little more, like right there. The only issue is that this looks a bit unrealistic with this perfectly sharp line, and the shadows not being abraded at all. If we look here, we can see that the shadow is abraded by the pebbles. And if we look here, we can see that the shadow is actually very smooth, and it has no abrasion whatsoever. So at this point, I can decide to pull up my Hypershade again and say, you know what, I really would like to go to my shadow mat here, and I would like to apply a displacement map to it to mimic the sort of height and displacement and texture of these pebbles. This is decomposed granite in this garden. Before I do that though, there's a couple of things I have to do. I'm going to minimize these and we'll talk about those really quickly. One, I need to give this shadow plate more resolution. That's easy enough to do. I'll simply come up to modeling, and under edit mesh we'll add some divisions, and I'll add probably, let's add 4 divisions. Now that's a lot. I know it's a lot of resolution, but when we're displacing something, I want good resolution so that when I go and change the subdivision attributes in its shape node, I don't have to put them unrealistically high. And here's what I'm talking about. My second step before I can apply displacement map to my shadow plate here is to come here under the planes shape node, open up the Arnold tab, come down to subdivision, and change our subdivision type from none to Catmull Clark. It'll be abbreviated as Cat Clark. And then I'll give this probably 5 iterations. So that means all of these subdivisions will be multiplied by 5 at render time to create that displacement. Now that's a lot. We'll see if it's too much, we'll see if it's not enough, we'll see if it's just right. There is no great mathematical formula that I wish I could tell you guys about that would tell me if this was the perfect number or not. So back to the Hypershade. Again, I'm going to map out this, and you can see in my shadow mat group I have a slot for displacement shader. So let's go find a displacement material. I want something that'll mimic this gravel fairly well. You might think that something like simplex noise might work. We can give it a try. There are times where I'll go through 2 or 3 until I get the exact one that I want, but I think simplex noise might work pretty well for us. The first thing I'll do, let's do it here in the attribute editor, it's probably easier to see, is I do want to drop the scale to maybe 0.01. We don't need a lot of displacement, just a very gentle displacement of this texture. 2, I kind of need to go in and maybe tweak the way this texture behaves so it looks a bit more like gravel. So I can play with scale kind of like this. I can play with amplitude, etc. But what I'd like to do first and foremost is I kind of want to do a render and see how everything looks, because I really might decide that this is not the best decision, the simplex noise, for a displacement map. So let me minimize that, sorry, and I'll pull up our render window really quickly. And we'll be able to see it in the shadow here. Remember, displacement maps create new geometry at render time so that I don't have to model in hundreds and millions of these pebbles. I'm just going to use a texture that, oh, you can tell that doesn't look terribly, well, doesn't look horrific. I've seen worse. However, it's a bit much. So again, I don't know if that was the best choice, this simplex noise. So I'm going to right click on my displacement here. I'm going to break that connection. And I think instead, let's go with a solid fractal here. Now the reason I do like solid fractal over that simplex noise is under color balance, I can make sure that alpha is luminance is checked, and I could also set my alpha offset, and this is important for you guys to remember, to -0.5. I need to do that to make sure the displacement map can displace black values on a negative downward and white values on a positive up. And the simplex noise doesn't give me that node, so already I have a bit more control here. Now I might tweak this ratio. I am going to tweak the ripples and the depth threshold, things like that, just to play around and see what's going to give me. Might as well hit a render here so we can kind of see it, right? Give it a sec. Because remember, I just want to give the edge of this rock a little bit of crenellation, and I want the shadow to have just a little bit of speckling. Now, that's too heavy. However, I do like the kind of displacement that we're getting from it. You see what I mean? So I think what we need to do is twofold. One, we need to reduce the amount of displacement that we're creating on this map. And two, we are probably going to tweak and give this a little bit more resolution because this is a very fine texture that we're using, and I think we're going to need a little bit more resolution here. So we'll stop that, minimize that, and let's go once again to the shadow plane shape node, and under iterations I'm going to push it up to, this is a pretty hard number, 8. It's high. However, we should get, I'm going to close that, we should get a pretty nice displacement map out of this. So let's hit play. We'll let it start to render, and then we'll go look at the edges and our shadow and make sure it's doing what we want it to do. Now I'll pause that while it renders. Now if things look a little different, don't panic. OBS Studio crashed. Today is just crashy Tuesday, so I had to tweak a few things and fix it. However, we're back to talking about creating displacement map, and I think I've got it sort of tweaked right here. Whoops, let's pull Maya back up, and I'll pull that render back up right here, and you can see if we zoom in, we've got kind of nice texture around in here. We could do a little bit better, but for now we've got some pretty nice texture on the gravel. This is generally also why I turn off the Arnold denoiser and prefer to tweak my settings. And that's because the Arnold denoiser has a nasty habit of, sorry about that, bring that back up, has a nasty habit of erasing very fine textures because it sees them as noise. And that displacement map is a pretty fine texture. So I'm going to just tweak my render engine settings. I don't have transmission, subsurface scattering, or volume indirect in my scene, so I really don't need to sample them. I do have diffuse and I do have specular, and so I'm going to push just experience tells. I'm not going to bung about with AOVs right now, and let's just take a real quick look at our render here. And I know we're seeing this funky patch, and I'm going to show you how to deal with that. This is the plane as it's being displaced. Alright, so that's much better. I think we can tweak our render settings a little bit more. We are looking at this at 300%, so at 1:1 I think it's looking pretty okay. You can see that we've got the granularity in our shadow that we've got over here. But I do need to get rid of this patch, and what that is from, and this is something that's good to know, is if I select this shadow map, remember we have a displacement map on it. That displacement map is creating geometric texture, which the light is hitting, and it's wanting to cast shadows upon itself. The easiest thing to do is under our shape node, under the Arnold tab, I'm going to turn self shadows off. And now we'll render it again, and you'll see that we're getting a nice clean render without this patch in the middle. There we go. And if we looked at, it's still rendering, but we're going to look at the alpha channel anyway. If you look at the alpha channel, this is pretty much what we're getting. Not too bad. And of course, if I were ready to render this for composite, I need to select my image plane in the background and turn its alpha gain down to 0. And that's so that when we do render it, although we can see it here, once we bring it into DaVinci Resolve and give it the proper LUT and hit this key, it won't be there anymore. Now you can see we still need to do some more camera AA sampling in here. And to get it really clean and smooth without using the Arnold denoiser, which again, not a huge fan of, I'm simply going to push camera AA up to 5, diffuse 4, specular can stay at 3. We probably could even get away with specular at 2. And that should give us, oh, also one last thing. Let's make sure to set appropriate sample level on our sky dome light. So samples of at least 4 for a final render. And while the render will take a few seconds longer, I'll pause it. That's a pretty good render right there. If I look at the alpha channel is not bad. And you can see where we're getting that, once again, that texture that I kind of want just to break up the edge of that rock from the displacement map and to break up the shadow. Now, like I told you, in post I'll probably adjust this shadow here. I would render these out separately. That's probably a different tutorial. I don't want this to run too bloody long, but hopefully this will help you guys to, again, set up scenes that do not have any sort of perspective lines that we can use to help us out. All right. Enjoy. Hope this one's okay. I'm going to edit it together. Let me know if it's just a dumpster fire, and I'll simply have to redo it. Big fun. All right. Remember to like and subscribe, kids. Yay.